Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crossroads of Cognizance, the show where we come together from the East Coast, from the West Coast, and talk about everything that happens over the last week, the trends we're seeing, ways in which we've seen those trends affect the community, or things that people are talking about. And we hope to share some cool insights with you or things that we've learned from our own lives and from the ways in which we help others. So over here on the East Coast, I am Dolly Rose. I am the owner and keeper of Crystal Cognizance, where we do meditations. We serve the community through different healing services, readings, intuition, and just sometimes it's just good conversation. So we're holding down the fort over here on the East Coast, and I am here today with my co-host.
Hi, everybody. I'm Katrina Rasbold. Can you hear me, Dahlia?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. I wasn't sure if I had my mic in the right place. I am co-owner of Crossroads Metaphysical Store in Shingle Springs, California. We are in the beautiful mountain area right now where it is just pouring rain, and that's one of
Oh
my
no.
most magical times. I wrote a book called Weather Witchery, and in
Oh.
it, I talk about the ways that you can use different weather events in order to
Mm.
facilitate certain types of magic. And rain, of course, washes everything clean. And so I'm very and the water, of course, that tunes into intuition and emotion. And so there's a lot of flowing that's happening today, and I'm really excited for that because boy, do we need water. And there's actually been thunder, which we almost never have. So it's just been a
Okay, cool.
glorious sleepy day. And and Crossroads is cooking. Let me tell you, the retail has not been huge lately. It's I think the gas situation is really impacting people because normally this time of the year we're just bustling, and the weather and that sort of thing. So it's a very quiet day here at the Crossroads. So I have been doing cleansings for people. I've been doing spell work for people. And really, the themes are interesting. And you and I had some ideas. Well, no, that's a lot. You had some ideas for what we could talk about. And I thought they were great ideas. So we're going to talk about those. So, yes, that's
Well, I think it was a little bit of a shared effort. I mean, I certainly thought of all the healings that you do. I wanted to touch on your weather witchery.
mm-hmm.
Something I've always been drawn to is thunderstorms and lightning storms. And there was a period in my spiritual path where I was talking to them. I don't get that opportunity as much, but I think having those conversations with the energy, I think it's probably similar if I was to assume to what you're doing, like tapping into ways that you can work with the energy, to enhance or remove or wash away, like you were saying. And it's really like a really unique practice. Like if you've ever been outside after a lightning storm, the air is so crisp and it's almost like the claps of thunder also will just like reset everything. It's a really great time. And it's very common that I hear Californians being like, "We finally got rain." And I'm
We got
like, "Whoa."
rain, yeah. So the nice thing about a thunderstorm is that you've got all four elements involved. So you've got fire in the lightning, you've got earth in the thunder, you've got water, of course, and then you've got air in the wind. And so
Nice.
that's how those balance is you get a showing and a representation. It's almost like a curtain call for all four elements to strut their stuff. And so afterwards, that's why everything feels so wonderfully, beautifully balanced. And it's really fascinating what weather does for us. The position that I took when I wrote the book was I was going to do a presentation for PantheaCon, which was a major event they used to have out in San Jose. It was 4 days of lectures by pagan and witchy practitioners. And I was teaching on weather witchery, and I went to research it, and there was no information. It was interesting how there were no
Hmm.
good books on weather witchery when that has been one of our oldest forms of magic. And all I could find online when I was researching it was reasons not to do it. And they were all scare tactics like, you don't know what you're dealing with, or, this doesn't. Um, This doesn't help the harm's done perspective and things like that. Excuse me while I turn off my heater. It's killing me. Anyway, there were all these reasons not to do it, but there was no guidance on how to do it. And that was why I wrote my book, because I had done weather witching for years.
Right.
And there's each weather event you can come up to has its own energy, it has its own pulse, it has its own uh, contribution to whatever work you happen to be doing. Snow,
Right.
for instance, conceals. It makes everything look fresh and new. It has the white of purity. However, it's actually clear. It just shows itself to be white due to the reflection. And it also is about unity, because whether we're talking about an avalanche or one flake, we call it snow. It all works cooperatively. And
Oh,
even high heat is another form of weather that is very demanding. It's very male, it's very proactive. And it reminds you to have the long days to get out there and get things done when you need to be working. It's um, the seasons themselves give us a pattern for life. It tells us work longer at this time of the year, go inside during this time of the year. And when we have jobs, which we don't anymore, except for maybe me, that have the luxury of following the seasons, it's interesting how our biorhythms shift to that and how they accommodate that sort of thing. One of the most interesting weather events is actually hail, because
hmm.
hail is one of the few weather events that hurts. And it doesn't matter, like lightning has to strike you really to cause harm.
Right.
um, you have to have a flash flood to cause harm, but if you are standing out in even the hailstorm of the smallest hail, you will feel it, it'll sting you.
Yes, you will.
And it's telling you, get inside, get busy, move from where you are right now. So
Yeah.
anytime we have a hailstorm, the message is, hey, there's something you all need to be doing that you're not doing, so do the thing right now. So that's
Interesting.
weather witchery in a nutshell for me. That's how I teach it.
Well, I mean, I think that's enough for to inspire people too. I was thinking to myself when we had our last hailstorm out here, because we did have one in the last couple of years. I think it was about 2 years ago. But I was trying to, everybody pinpoints, well, was it pre-COVID or was it post-COVID? And so I can't quite pinpoint it in my mind, but knowing things, yeah, it was probably definitely a time for the Northern Virginia area to move of some kind because
It's all
I mean,
about get
it's
off the
transient area.
fence. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is people think something like that is global in nature. Not global necessarily, but it impacts a large number of people. If you're having a hailstorm, it's likely your neighbors are also having a hailstorm. The next county over might be having a hailstorm. So, how does a magical message need to reach such a large group of people? And even with astrology, I mean, when we look at some of the outlying planets, they take a generation to move through their orbit,
Oh, yeah.
and still they have that effect. That's how we get global change, such as the huge change that happened from the conservative 50s into Woodstock and the hippie mentality, and how that led us into the 80s, the me time. And we had all of these sort of decades that define themselves in a certain way, and I believe that that's astrologically indicated.
Absolutely. And we've had such weird, funky weather all over the place over the last 2 years of COVID. So we can talk about defining times. Um, I mean, from the forest fires through, I mean, so many different I all I can say is so many different events, right? So when
Definitely.
what's interesting regarding the weather events, I think it's interesting that you spoke to first how these were seen as things not to mess with and to maybe even be taken as negative.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I wanted to bring up today, in a slight segue to things we might perceive as negative, but maybe there are underlying messages and ways in which we can use the energy, was chronic conditions. Now, um, in my practice, and I'm sure in yours, and then in your life, because you've spoken of your chronic condition here on the show,
Hmm.
um, I come across folks that have chronic conditions of different kinds, and they're very spiritually gifted, but their bodies just won't get on board. And so, oh, it looks like we have a weather question before I move on.
Okay,
That the
Sylvia.
answers yes. Would you classify wildfires as weather events? Northern Arizona is burning.
I would call them weather adjacent because they're an experience that is, in some ways, created by the weather, but they are not the weather. They're also amplified by certain weather aspects, but
Mm,
they are not those aspects. So if we have a good rain season and a good snow season, our fire risk is extremely low. So, no, that's not a weather, but that is something that is created by the weather. When we are extremely dry, we're at higher risk for that fire to happen. Also, the mitigations, such as is the wind blowing and which way is it blowing, that changes as I saw the entire course of what destruction of fire is going to do. You know,
yeah.
the fire that took my home was blowing away from me for the entire day, and then very abruptly the wind shifted and it was coming and we had to get out. So it's definitely related to wind and, of course, rain. You know, the big hope when you're having a huge fire is that there's going to be rain that's going to put it out. So it's very affected by the weather, but I would not consider it a weather event. How about you, Dahlia?
I wouldn't say, well, I don't know about classifications, right? I mean, I think I agree with you as far as not calling it a weather event. But my question for you, rather than the consideration, is there something to be done with that? Do you take that weather adjacent event as a message, or do you incorporate it in the magic you're already working with?
I
What does
think
that
we
look like?
take everything around us as a message.
Okay.
One of the things I used to teach my student is everything happens for a purpose. Absolutely. It's just that some of those purposes are not very interesting at all.
Right.
Um, it's sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And the fact is that these weather events happen and they create outcomes for people. They create emotions in people. Those are
Sure.
all part of the energy construct of what's happening around that area. And so that's energy that we can definitely use in different ways. And it's energy that we might want to mitigate in some ways. Now, let's say we've got a town that is in a fervor of fear because there's a wildfire nearby. So we've got
Hmm.
all these people with amped up energy. Do we want to calm them down? Probably
Yeah.
not. We need that
Oh,
sense of urgency in them because if there's a fire coming, we don't want them all passed out from comfort energy. We want them alert. We want them responding as the herd does to threat.
interesting.
So if we've got a herd of gazelles and one of them gets picked off by a lion, we want the entire gazelle herd to move. And if
Right.
they're complacent and calm, they're going to get eaten.
So I guess I took that calmness, and the consideration for the area, right?
Hmm.
I thought that energy might feed the fire, so maybe, taking this calm approach, not that you wouldn't move, but, trying to settle any fear being fed into the fire. Because, the nation is watching too in most cases. And I think when our collective
Hmm.
consciousness decides on something, it sort of aggravates the situation, right? So feelings of hopelessness lead to, um, fewer solutions coming to be inspired in our leadership and things like that, right?
Well, and people have to be so very careful about the words and the labels that they use
Mhm.
when they're responding to tragic events and when they're responding to situations in their own lives. I have so many people that sit on my couch in intake when we're talking before we go into the actual cleansing part who will say, "This is the worst thing that could ever have happened. This is so
Right.
catastrophic. This is, my life is over." And you're kind of sitting there going, eh. is it? Because I
Yeah.
can think of about 100 things just without trying that would be worse than what you're describing to me.
Great. Oh, I think we're having some connectivity stuff. Um, oh no, did we lose her? Sylvia, I think sort of the totality of your answer looks like maybe the wildfires are not necessarily a weather event, right? They are weather adjacent. But the real questions would be, what are you, where does that place you? Where are you emotionally invested? And then that could have you either working with the energies, maybe getting into a calm state so as not to feed the fear of the energies, while at the same time, gathering what you can and, you know, either moving out of the way of harm or what have you. So I think, um, as far as your question's concerned, the minimum answer is it's not a weather event. So we'll see what happens here as technology reigns. I'm wondering when Mercury retrograde is, because I'm sure it's soon. It has to be. The electronics have been all over the place. So the Katrina will be right back. With regard to the other topic of conversation today, I'll kind of fill you guys in on some of my thoughts and then we'll get Katrina back on board here. So when I see clients, I tend to see clients that are, oh, good, she's back. Okay. I tend to see clients.
That was fun.
That was interesting.
Yeah, hi.
So I was just moving into the chronic clients
Mm-hmm.
situation. Oh, thank you, Kelly. So I was talking about maybe Mercury was in retrograde and Kelly thinks it's May 10th. You're probably right, which means that I think we're in the shadow phase.
Kelly, don't
Um,
forget I've got your certificate, sweetheart.
oh, yay!
Yay.
Master healer,
So
right?
I agree that I, Mercury may be playing. So what I was, just to finalize very quickly, what I was saying is that the labels that we use are so important in amping up or objectifying what's happening with us. And the more that we catastrophize what has happened or what's going on with us in our labels, the more energy we put toward the situation. So when you mention the fires, of course, the news wants to make it as tragic as they can make it. And if we co-opt into that, we can definitely add to the energy of the fire as being something bigger. And I do think it feeds on that. If
Yeah,
we're trying to take a calm approach, but still aware, I think I would want people to be more informed and logical about their actions than
right.
emotional and reactive.
Right. That reactivity plays a huge part. I mean, reactive energy is like it's like using a bazooka to kill a spider. It's going to cause a burst of some kind, be it in your
Mm-hmm.
life, more mistakes are being able to be made, and so on and so forth. So,
Yeah.
uh, very cool.
So
Um,
the chronic illnesses, I
yes,
that's something that we address pretty often because people want a cure. They want to get fixed. And whether or not I can have an impact, and I don't know if Dahlia works the same way on this or not, but whether or not I can help somebody with a chronic illness is going to be completely relevant to how energy and spirit are impacting the illness. If it is an illness that has a spiritual cause, then I can work with that. If it's an illness that happened because they got sick, then I can't fix it.
Right.
I might be able to mitigate the symptoms a little bit, but I can't cure it if it doesn't have a spiritual cause in the nature of it. So that's how I approach and what I tell people. And I practice with mind, body, and spirit as kind of a three-legged stool, where
Mm,
if one is compromised, the others are going to have to compensate and they're going to be off kilter
absolutely.
because one is off. And so eventually, mind, body, and spirit will all suffer. So, and also that's how I perceive threefold law is that when we do something, the effects of that return to us or stay with us in our mind, in our body, and in our spirit. I don't see it as a quantitative, you're going to get hit three times as hard. I see it as there are three places or three levels where we experience something. So
Right.
when we have a malady of some kind, it's probably related either to a past trauma spiritually, to a curse somebody sent to us, or to something we manifested inwardly due to emotional trauma. The other side of it is you walked past somebody with a germ and you got sick.
Right. And so the conversation that I find myself having is the difference between chronic conditions and sudden onset conditions. Like you were saying, sometimes you just get sick,
Mm-hmm.
and there may be curse like implications or psychic attacks or something like that. And I think it's important to sort of divide the community approach on these things because I know spiritual trends out there will talk about ascension and ascension symptoms and how your body may do this and you may have these things going on. And I think that the um, chronic condition individual simply cannot um, sorry, something flew on me or by me. That's never a fun thing. um they simply can't subscribe to, like, okay, one day I'm going to be beyond this thing. I think that the chronic symptoms individual, the chronic condition individual, um has a better opportunity sort of um harmonizing with their condition
Mm-hmm.
as a partner, as opposed to this thing they need to defeat. And because I think there is some spiritual base within chronic conditions and being disconnected from your body. I've seen it in people with MS, sort of not being fully ground into their body and disconnecting at the base of the spine. It can
Mm-hmm.
be due to stress. It can be due to like a lot of different things, or they may have been born with the what do you call that? They may be um, predisposed to that condition, and then stress makes it happen. But there's this disconnect where it's almost like the spirit forgets the body, and so then maybe during an awakening process as well, a burst of an inflammatory response will happen. And then they'll come in and they'll be like, yeah, I must be getting psychically attacked or spiritually haunted. And it's like, well, just like the fires that we were talking about with Sylvia, this may be healing adjacent. Like you may be more susceptible to those psychic attacks and concerns that you have, but there's a place where your body is screaming for help because it's not going along that
Mm-hmm.
transcendent journey for you. And so I love the threefold law approach, because I had heard it, three times, you get three times what you put out. But to say mind, body, and spirit, that you would get hit in one of those ways, it also speaks to percentages. Why some people are so physically strong, but they notice that when they're experiencing a chronic condition or even a sudden onset condition, their psychic awareness goes down,
Mm-hmm.
which is not the case for everybody. Which is why I think it's also important when you were talking about how we talk about these things earlier. How it's good to not stand on, well, there must be something wrong with you. I think it's really important to cultivate that dictionary and that language with your either your chronic condition or your body's place of balance, so that when you go to talk to your body to be like, hey, am I being attacked, or is this part of us, the conversation leads to a a place of growth or a pathway back to balance or
Hmm.
resolution.
One of the ways that I see the disassociation that you're talking about is in chronic conditions where people feel their body has attacked them or their
Mm-hmm.
body's turned on them or betrayed them in some way. And MS is one of them, fibromyalgia is another. But it usually doesn't happen with heart conditions. It doesn't usually happen with like liver dysfunction and things like that when there's an individual organ involved. But when it's a whole body effect, people tend to start seeing their body as the enemy, as something that has betrayed them. And that's when I notice that disconnect from being present. I also have noticed the disconnect happen in pregnant women who, at
Mm.
some deep level, don't want to be pregnant.
Mm.
And it could be that they're having this child because a partner wants it, or it was a surprise, or whatever it might be. But if the mother is not really signed on with the idea of this pregnancy, I also see that disassociation. And it's very clear when you're an energy worker, you can really feel when that person is not all there, and when they've kind of popped out a little, even a little bit. It doesn't have to be a full thing, but just a partial checkout. And the question becomes, do you want to pull them back in or not?
Hmm.
Do they want to be there?
Yeah.
Do they need to be distanced because of the pain level they're having, or because they have emotional stuff that they got to work through? So that's always questions we have to decide on the fly
Right.
in treatment plans. And sometimes it's a matter of asking the person, hey, I'm noticing this. Do you want me to bring you back, or do you want to just trip out for a little while?
And understanding that bringing back process isn't, a one-time deal, because our bodies, I think, are so used to our bodies' normal way of being is habit, which is why,
Mm-hmm.
we often, like if you've ever been to a chiropractor or something like that, they're like, hey, come back in a few weeks because you're going to be hunched back over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, your body is used to what it can normalize. And if it's normalized pain, and then you've ejected yourself each time that pain has come, you're gonna have to kind of come back, unless you are going through some, week long, several week long treatment, you
Mm-hmm.
know, either with like an occupational therapist or in the jungle, or, with your local healer or witch, you know. And it's interesting, you talked about asking if they want to come back into the body. We've had the conversation before. Sometimes folks will say yes,
Mm-hmm.
but then it means something entirely different. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not 100% of a yes. And I will often recommend
Yes.
people, right? I think,
I think.
um, well, now that you've said it like that,
Mm-hmm.
um, I will often ask a person's cells and their tissues, and, if they're having an organ issue, or if you have an injury that's disconnected you from a limb, having conversation with those, I'll often recommend that folks join me in that conversation. So, hey, talk to your knee back when it was its healthiest. Maybe it doesn't remember that
Mm-hmm.
there was this place where, it wasn't in constant pain. And that this is a habit. And then that's not to minimize any conditions, but more to bring awareness back. I remember doing a meditation where I was shown like how forgetful the body can be,
Oh
and
yeah.
how we, like, when we're so focused on ascending and moving up and moving forward, that this just gets left behind. So you have talked about your chronic condition, Katrina. Are there things that you have done either like muggle like or magically to support yourself.
Well, real quick, something I wanted before it goes away that I wanted to add to what you just said. I was just having a conversation last night with the advanced healers, the Bio U2 kids, and we were talking about reintegration
Hmm.
and exactly what you're saying, pulling that energy that was lost back into the spiritual construct again, the energetic construct. And I was talking about how sometimes I'll get people in that dissociated when they were in their teens or, you know, 8 or 9 years old, and here they are 50 years old.
Mm.
And they're having their first cleansing. They're trying to get everything back together again. Just as you were saying, after that time, the body, it's like a baby bird going out of the nest. The body does not always recognize itself. The spirit does not always recognize itself. And so integrating that piece back into the person can be really traumatic. Sometimes there's scar tissue over the area where they left that you've got to dig through, and that's not comfortable, and get them seated back in there. It's not always just one and done, just pop them back in there. The body doesn't always receive it well, or the spirit does not always receive it well when they reattach to the body. So that's something else to think about. So when we're discussing this, I just want to say make sure you're working with a qualified healer when you're attempting any kind of reintegration. If you suspect that you've had a separation at some time and that you're not
Hmm.
all there, talk to somebody about that experience who can help you get back together again in a healthy and safe way. So I just want
Right.
to say that this is not something you meditate into place. This
Right.
is a professional experience that somebody helps happen with and for you. So with my condition, I have a couple of chronic conditions. The one that I would most readily discuss is the Meniere's that I have, the Meniere's disease. And I've had chronic conditions in the past that spontaneously went away. That this was a physical
Oh.
condition that was happening all the time and just very abruptly it left and went away. And that was almost always connected to some major change in my life.
Mm.
Um, One was chronic migraines. I used to have terrible, terrible migraines, and they started when I was a teenager at home, living with my parents, and they were just blinding. And my parents didn't really respect the fact that that was happening. I still had to go out and mow the yard in bright sunlight. I
Oh my
still
God.
had to do things even though I was in just crippling pain. They didn't take it seriously for whatever reason, and I don't fault them. I wasn't a hypochondriac kid. I didn't plead out being sick all the time, but for whatever reason, that they never took seriously. And then I got married very young, and they continued throughout my marriage. But when my first husband left, my headaches completely stopped.
Wow.
And I mean on a dime. And these were, I'd been x-rayed, I'd had all sorts of tests to figure out why I was having these kind of cluster migraines, and they couldn't find anything. And but no, when Paul left, I swear I never had another headache other than that occasional tension that you get. And he left 26 years ago. So this isn't a recent development. This is, long term proving that it just went away. Um, so sometimes the headache that we're having has to do with a negative influence or experience or stressor that's in your life. Now, granted, my life was situationally worse when he left. I
Mm.
suddenly had, 4 kids to take care of and almost no income. And, I had to move to another state where I hardly knew anybody. And it was just a horrible, horrible situation, but the headache stopped. So I can't really call specifically what it was about him
Hmm.
that caused that, but that was an example. So with the Meniere's disease, that's something that's come up with Eric so, since I met him. But it's debilitating in that the vertigo is unbelievable. And it's positional sometimes according to how I'm standing or leaning or direction my head is facing and things like that. And there is constant tinnitus. It never stops.
Mm,
It's so loud, and I have some deafness because of that. And so the way that I deal with it is very Western medicine, in that I take medication to help offset it a little bit. I use medication if I'm getting ready to have a primary event. It's there's foreshadowing when it's
mm.
coming, and I can start to prep early that this is going to happen. So I do that, but I also start to look at imbalances in my life, because of course that's what vertigo is going to be alike or be about, and see where I can offset the imbalances. So I do both.
Okay. And as you were speaking about the chronic conditions with migraines, I definitely had those as a kid. Um, and then I had irritable bowel syndrome with a boyfriend,
Mhm.
and every time we would fight, I would throw up. And thank God
Virgo,
that's all that would
yeah.
happen, right?
Virgos are
So all
ruled by
the
the stomach, so yeah.
yep.
And yours
Um,
would
and
be and
I
bowel.
ended up on I ended up on antidepressants because that was the cure, or not the cure, but the way to mitigate irritable
Hmm.
bowel, and I absolutely hated it.
Hmm.
And my doctor was like, "Well, we don't, you can get rid of the stress," and then I did, and the irritable bowel went away
Wow.
instantly. Yeah. And I can say, with that, it is, I guess it is also a chronic condition because, if I do get stressed out, that's the first place I'm punched. It's my gut.
Hmm.
But like you said, it's about shifting through some things, and I didn't have magical practices back then. I just had, um, the mundane outlets, and I think it's important to talk about how those are still useful, and then, if there are things that you would prefer not to have in your life, working with a physician and working with a holistic person to alleviate symptoms, or finding balance again, or getting rid of the person causing it is the way to
Hmm.
go.
One of the challenges I'm having with an upcoming surgery that I have to have is I am completely asymptomatic.
Mm,
And it feels weird to be getting ready to have a surgery that is a major surgery. It's going to have huge downtime when I have zero symptoms.
right.
So that's something I'm trying to balance out in my life. I mean, it's necessary. The pathology is very clear on that, but it's still weird, and I'm trying to make that make sense in my mind. I'm going to do something that's going to cause me to have pain and cause me to be out of commission and cause me to have all of these after effects going on. But I'm going to do it when I feel fine right now, and when I feel fine walking into the hospital.
Yeah. Like getting ahead of the issue, but not
Hmm.
really having full understanding of the issue because it hasn't presented itself.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
and that completely deals with the psychic realm, like, the preparation of it all, and mindset, and that's, I mean, that's really all you can, I imagine, deal with at this time. So,
It's hard to make room for other things.
yeah. Um, as far as sudden onset conditions, I think we've talked about like how to manage those throughout the show too, right? Like we've
Hmm.
had different instances where we've talked about candles and crystals and things like that. And I think it's important to talk about how maybe also those places are not the ideal place to like meditate things away, but like this mentality of like having to outrun things is not entirely realistic.
No, you have to run toward it.
Yeah. So, um, aside from the actual running towards it, right? Like you're running towards it with whatever tools you have available, with um, um, working with your healer, working with your holistic person,
And like you said, communication.
taking,
I'm sorry, I didn't
yeah,
mean to interrupt. Sorry.
No, no, no.
hearing.
Communication, communication is a great one. I think it was another show you were like, you said to Eric, I told you I didn't want to hear your shit or something
Yeah,
like
you know, yeah, that's the first thing I said to him when they told me I would likely go deaf. I'm like, I told you I did not want to listen to your shit. And sure enough,
that.
I did start to go deaf. So,
Oh no.
which is weird because we just had a moment where he was yelling something to me from 3 rooms away in the shop. And I can hear that he's talking, but I can't hear what he's saying. And I think he got really frustrated with me that I couldn't hear him. I'm like, well, text me or some shit, you know?
Right, get my attention, then start yelling.
Yeah, yeah. But and so we look at what is the cause of that, and there are very clear imbalances in my life. I mean, I wouldn't be 100 pounds overweight if there were not imbalances in my life, and there are imbalances in regard to output with people. For instance, my children versus what I'm given back and what I seek or expect back, and so we have to examine the very literal interpretation of what is happening with that body part.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
for instance, a lot of women and men who experience breast cancer are having imbalanced interpersonal relationships,
Hmm.
unrequited love, um, where they're giving more than they're getting back. That's a really common theme. A lot of women, I don't think it's a kind of a accident that a lot of women have hysterectomies and uh, salpingo-oophorectomies and other reproductive issues after their children have left home. It's not just that it's aged out, it's that there is that question of, okay, well, what do we do now? And so it has to do with what sort of image of yourself are you crafting outside of being a hands-on mother to kids.
Mm.
And it's not that only mothers have those surgeries, it's that that is a common theme when that happens. I have a new theme that's interesting that I'm still thinking on, and I know that a lot of my feelings about it are patriarchal, and I know that a lot of my feelings on it are based on my life experience, and I can't use either of those two things to form opinions. But I know several young people, young women, who are
Hmm.
opting to end reproduction
Mm.
um, completely with tubal ligations or removing the fallopian tubes completely. And I'm honored that they confide this to me, and that this is I'm excited to see young people taking control over situations in their life such as that. I also know, and I'm not one of these people that says, oh, you should keep your reproductive abilities because you might marry somebody who wants to have children. And I think it should always be, how do we see ourselves reproducing? I know how incredibly I have changed over the last 40, 50 years.
Hmm.
Definitive things like that make me uncomfortable sometimes, but I see the joy in their faces that this has remedied a situation for them, and I'm excited for them. So
Yeah.
that's another physical thing that I tend to view as people taking control of their own destinies in some way.
I definitely understand the discomfort of like the finality of it, especially since life is it tends to be in cycles. Um, you know, where do those cycles take you? And there's not a formula for these cycles, right? I think that's the freedom of choice. Um, and then there's other aspects of this too, I mean, like on a political scale, if they're going to be taking away our right to choose, is this
Hmm.
also a self-protective effort? So there's so
Sure.
many nuances that go into that.
You are so right. And I had weird reproductive, 6 kids, and I have weird reproductive experiences with all of them. Like one of them, I found out I was pregnant when I did the lab work for the pre-op to have my tubes tied.
Oh no.
Another one of my kids was conceived the day my husband, the first husband, had his um, his vasectomy.
Vasectomy.
Yeah, the same month. Yeah, I found out I was
Your kids
pregnant
were
the same month.
determined to come into the world.
Dude,
They were like,
dude,
listen, move out of
Delina,
my way.
my daughter, it was Valentine's Day. I had hate sex on it was the first time I had sex in months and months using a condom and a sponge on the last day of my period. Swear to God. I yeah.
Determined children. But now they bring that determination into the world. Kids are born into the energy that they're created for sure.
God help them.
I think there's something to be said here for combining. I love that we talked a little bit about weather witchery here as well,
Mm-hmm.
because as we're having these different weather events, there may be an opportunity to reconnect with the body. Hopefully, it's not through hail hitting your body and you being like, okay, I feel that.
By the way, I think that book, if you have a Kindle or you read ebooks, I think that book is still just 99 cents on
Oh, cool.
Amazon. It's buried so deeply, you'd probably have to put Weather Witchery Raspbowl to find it, but it'll pop up. And I think it's even available on Kindle Unlimited if you have that.
Excellent. Should check it out. And then, a lot of her articles are still available on it's not Pagan Pride site, it is
Pathos Pagan.
Pathos.
But
Yes.
I think they're almost all duplicated on KatrinaRaspel.com.
Which is where you need to go.
Pathos actually, um, they sold to a different owner, which is why a lot of us bailed on them. Uh, they
Oh,
they're they ran things a whole lot different than I think it was BeliefNet was what we were a part of. But anyway, they have all of these pop-ups that just completely convolute the reading experience. So I tend not to go to Pathos Pagan except to read John Beckett. That's the only one I check in on.
oh.
But
So
so yes, yeah,
KatrinaRaspel.com.
KatrinaRaspel.com. And they're organized according to, if you look in the sidebar, they're organized according to topic.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, Reconnecting with your body. Thoughts,
Yeah.
suggestions.
You know, I think it's about gratitude. Now, for
Okay.
instance, to be clear, and this isn't public knowledge, although I guess it now it is, but given our small numbers, I don't think that I'm in danger here. What I'm having is a complete hysterectomy, bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy. Everything's coming out. So what I've had to do is work from a position of gratitude and think about my uterus and thank
Mm.
it. Even though it's gone renegade now, I have to think about how frustrated it must be not being able to fulfill its purpose because
Mm.
it had a clear design for what I was supposed to do, which was to make a lot of babies. I'm as fertile as the Tennessee Valley, and now that I'm supposed to be in menopause, it's decided not to do that and to create negative cells in there.
Mm.
So, what I'm trying to do as my uterus is trying to poison itself and me is to thank it for the 6 healthy babies that it gave me, for the easy periods that it gave me, for the minor little bit of menopause symptoms that I had, and keeping that really simple for me, for all of the thousands of lustrous, amazing orgasms that it participated in over the past many years. I just fill it with gratitude and ask that I tell it, man, your watch has ended. Okay. Just I release you with gratitude. I release you with love. Um, you know, just off you go. Leave nothing but footprints, take nothing but memories. Just and I kind of wanted to keep it, and I found out you can't do that because they have to send it away to pathology and such. But I think that communicating with your body in a non confrontational way,
Yeah.
communicate with your body with love, that you are here, that you are still present, that even if it's aching, it's working still despite the struggle. It's being a good little soldier for you. And just tune into, if you're having chest pains, definitely call 911, but also ask your
Right.
heart, why are you hurting? Why are you broken? What's happening? What are you reliving right now? What are you experiencing right now? And honor that the most common words that your body's trying to tell you is slow down, stop,
Yes.
rest, let me rest. I'm so tired. Just take care of me, love me. Give yourself massages and orgasms and have somebody stroke your hair. I mean, you can probably find even some freak on the bus or something that'll rub your hair for you, and just give them $10 and just be like, just rub my hair. Just, do nice things for your body and show your body that you care, that you love it, not that you're angry with it, not that you want to cut off your fat belly and mutilate yourself, but that, hey, this is soft and wonderful and comfy, and I love how it bounces. And I love how smooth my skin is. I love how my leg feels when I touch this muscle right here. Just find things about your body that you love and just love all up on yourself.
Yeah.
And that helps, I think, better than anything. And if you know how to do it, send Reiki to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They have what are they called? Cuddle therapists. So there are people that will you can pay to hold you, and that's
Oh, I
your
don't want to touch nobody
experience.
that much. Just reach over the seat and rub my hair. You freak.
Also, you showed us a really beautiful practice that involved wrapping ourselves in
Mm-hmm.
blankets, and then I recall talking to a previous partner who had gotten one of those beds that kind of folds, and they
Mm.
remarked that it was like being held, and I was like, I never thought about that. So
Weighted
there's like
blankets, man.
yes, yes, and we brought those up before. So, there is, of course, like we've said in the show, there are your magical and crystal options. But please don't go to the doctor and be like, you know what, doc, I'm anemic. I got my amethyst right here, because
Yeah.
amethyst has iron in it. It's good for people with anemia. But at the same time, if you have to reach for it, it's probably worth the question and the conversation with your body, like Katrina's saying, you know, I think it's anemia where you don't fully accept yourself. Like there's this disconnect where you're losing energy to maybe I want to say like the largeness of who you are. Like maybe you're supposed to have global impact in this world, or there's people you're supposed to help, and you're just completely resistant to that. Who am I to do this, et cetera, et cetera. And then boom, you're anemic. Of course, anemia is something that you can be born with. My children, I think it was Mason, my littlest, who really like set that off for me, anemia. So, um, but he came at a very pivotal time in my life as well. And having that conversation with the cells in my blood, it's a conversation, it's a constant conversation. So like Katrina said, if you're finding yourself in these situations, have conversation, have gratitude. And what's interesting is we are in a gibbous moon right now, like lunar phase, and that's a really great time for gratitude. So the suggestion of gratitude is right on time for where we are on a weekly basis, because I believe that's how it cycles. Um, so thank you for that, Katrina. Um, Other thoughts?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay. So we've reached that point in the show where we will kind of leave things to simmer with you all. Um, how can you? Well, we began with the difference between chronic conditions and sudden onset conditions.
Oh, wait, I
Yes,
thought
they
of
could.
something.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, friend. I
No,
just stepped
good.
on you so hard. I was looking down at Tamara's comment about the storm that we're Tamara's local to me. And I was looking at the storm that we're having right now. There's something weird about it. So I did this and Eric did this because we so wanted some rain. And so a couple weeks ago, when we moved everything in our shop, We have TVs in the shop for
Hmm.
teaching purposes, and the main one in the big classroom we can see from where I sit and be just being on the showroom floor. And we put YouTube like 8 hours of rain videos, and we play it nonstop and focus on that. So all day long we're doing rain energy. So the reason it might feel weird, Tamara, is because it is magically manifested. I'm done now.
Your
Continue,
own
please. Sorry.
your own version of rain dancing via YouTube. See, I mean, mundane aspects of these different things, right? I mean, that brings to mind so many more ideas. Like, they have the crackling fire on there. If you
Hmm.
can't burn a fire, but you need to burn some things down, and look, Kelly's grateful for it,
Also
and so
local.
is Tamara.
That's my
So
witchiness all up in there. So don't be afraid.
release the anxiety. Again, you can use muggle memes for witchy purposes. Absolutely. For energy purposes as too. It reminds me of how some people will play those mantras throughout their home to shift the energy and stuff like
Hmm.
that too. And you can use that for your body as well. Again, we began with chronic conditions versus sudden onset. Yes, there could be psychic attacks or curses or different things thrown at you. Are they the cause or are they in proximity to? And we got a cool little mini lesson on weather witchery. So go out and buy the book, also catch the replay. And then bringing it all home, one of the most powerful things you can do to get back in your body, if that is the thing that caused the chronic condition, is to offer gratitude, to have conversations with your tissues, your organs, your cells, your extremities, all those things, bringing them back in to harmony. Maybe they've been forgotten by you, maybe the body forgot itself. And again, one of the things you said, Katrina, when you were talking about caring about your body, this isn't like go out and get on the next health kick. It's about you genuinely caring for your body, not because it needs to change, but because it's yours. And so, with that, I think it's okay to say goodbye and good night. And until next time, we will see you guys on Crossroads of Cognizance. Bye, everyone.
Bye.